shall we start? Podemos empezar? Então, bom dia novamente a todos e todas presentes. Espero que hoje seja um dia muito prazeroso, muito produtivo, da mesma forma que foi ontem. Hoje nós teremos, na parte da manhã, dois conferencistas e depois teremos um intervalo para almoço. À tarde, teremos mais 2 conferencistas. Da mesma forma, vocês continuem utilizando o botão da tradução da língua que você quer ouvir. As perguntas para os conferencistas deverão ser enviadas pelo grupo do Telegram. E essas perguntas serão feitas no final da conferência e nós vamos ler essas perguntas. Todos os microfones continuam silenciados para garantirmos a boa qualidade do áudio sem ruídos. Muito bem. Então, tenho o prazer de apresentar o meu amigo de muito tempo, o professor Dr. Veniamin Kolpachnikov, diretamente de Moscou, da Rússia. Professor Vênia é professor associado da Escola Superior de Economia da National Research University de Moscou, Rússia. Ele é especialista na área de aconselhamento psicológico, psicoterapia, formação psicológica da área da especialização, do treinamento, com 30 anos de experiência e autor de 105 artigos publicados. Veniamin, now it's your turn. Benny, are you here with us? Está aqui?
Yes.
Okay.
I am really happy to be with you today. And I feel deep connection with all of you, actually. I know some of you, I don't know some of you. I met some of you at some international conferences, but I feel deep connection with you. And I believe now, because of this COVID pandemic, it's very important to be connected to each other and to combat it together, not being separated. And I am very grateful to the organizers for this event, because we made connection between us. And I will share with you today some of my ideas about the person-centered approach as a culture. So now I will switch on my screen. Just a moment. So topic of my speech will be person-centered approach and culture. The problem is that very often we see culture in mostly negative perspective. And very often we think that different cultures, national, subcultures, and other just divide people because we are different. And also we very often think that cultural norms and traditions are just imposed to individuals. And very often, people who are devoted to the person-centered approach think that person-centered approach operates beyond any culture and any cultural differences. Well, and I want to look at the realities of the culture from another perspective. Well, I'm absolutely confident that culture not only may divide, but may connect people. And cultural norms are not just imposed to people, but individuals are attracted, may be attracted to cultural norms and traditions. And person-centered approach, I believe, is a cultural phenomenon. It is a cultural movement, a subculture, and probably it's the beginning of a new culture of the humankind. Well, now we'll try to talk about that in detail. Well, people who are devoted to the person-centered approach view it as a phenomenological approach. And really, person-centered approach is focused on individual experiences of human beings. And presence to one another and encounter with one another are highly appreciated in the person-centered approach. I know how important encounter is viewed in the Latin America. I participated in a number of person-centered events in Latin America, and encounter is the main thing people value at those events in Latin America. An encounter really is a great phenomenon which we may experience in our everyday relationships, in our professional practice. Richness and depth of personal experience and personal encounter underline PCA. It's the main phenomenon in the person-centered approach. And I also want to say that in this phenomenological framework of the person-centered approach, culture ordinarily usually is negatively viewed as imposition of external demands and norms to human beings. But what is culture in essence? Well, I have to say that problem of culture is a very complex problem in science and in everyday thinking. What I'm saying here is based on my study culture and based on the views on that school of thought which is developed in the Moscow State University in Russia. First First of all, culture is a historical way of being, historical way of people live, historical way of people communicate and relate to each other, historical way of people relate to themselves. It's very important. And culture is a concrete form of human activity and communication, which proved to be constructive and leading to satisfaction of vital needs and promoting actualizing of a person in the world. So it is a concrete form of human of being in the world, which proved to be constructive for people. That's why it is shared between people, and that's why people live this way of being. It is a constructive way to be in the world. And each culture consists of a system of knowledge and a system of activity. Each culture, whatever culture you take, national culture, subculture, or culture of the person-centered approach, which we will discuss a little bit later. And it is very important that culture is transferred to new members of society in active interaction and communication. Culture is spread through interaction and communication between parents and the child, between some people of the community and other people of the community. It is capable to be transferred to new members of society. These are some basics of understanding culture. And taking this phenomenological perspective, we may say that culture is a phenomenon of our living world. Really, we recognize in our experience culture as the ways and means people around us operate and communicate. We recognize culture as an objective reality, but we recognize it from our phenomenological perspective as a phenomena of our living world. And culture is the human organism, the condition of development, as well as physical environment is a condition of development for plant, potato, as an example. I am sure that many, if not most of you, know about this metaphor of Carl Rogers about facilitating of potato growth while potato is put into the earth and there is enough warm, enough wet, and the gardener takes care of potato to grow up. And this comfort physical environment, which is facilitated by a gardener, enable potato to grow up. A piece of potato which stayed somewhere in the chulan or a place where it was safe for winter, it also expresses this tendency for actualization. but because the conditions there are not good, in the sense it's cold, it's dark, well, it's not enough, there is not enough or too much wet, but anyway, potato grows up as much as possible in those conditions. And this is the role of physical conditions for growing of a potato as a plant. And culture for a human organism is a condition which is as important as physical condition is important for the plant, potato, for example. It's a very strong conviction I express to you. Culture is for a human organism, the condition of development. Very important. And culture is important for the person-centered development as well. It may enable or interfere with person-centered development. Well, some details for this more general statement which I just made. Empathy, congruence, and unconditional positive regard exist in real cultural human relationships in everyday life. They were not just invented by Carl Rogers. Of course, not always, not everywhere they are expressed, but they exist there. In this sense, well, person-centered approach exists as a subculture in the global culture of the humankind. It exists even being suppressed. It exists being not the main cultural experience, but yet it exists. It's very important to say. And Carl Rogers systemized his observations about practice of empathy, congruence, and unconditional positive regard as core conditions for constructive human development. But his observations came from his practice and from observing real human relationships in everyday life. And I want to stress that the person-centered development does not happen automatically. It happens in definite person-centered cultural conditions. If person-centered development just happened automatically, all people be person-centered and related to each other in the person-centered way, and related to themselves in the person-centered way. But this does not happen. It does not happen automatically. Person-centered approach extends through the relations of people. And experience of the person-centered attitude towards oneself is inspiring and attractive. And it often induces similar attitudes of the person towards people around. This is a quote from Rogers and his very famous article of 1959, and also from his book on becoming a person. And my own conversation with many people all over the world who are members of the person-centered community confirm that the experience of acceptance, understanding, and sincerity is the major stage in development of their own tendency to treat other people in similar, that means person-centered way. Really, I am a member of the Center for the Studies of the Person in La Jolla, California. And I talked to many people who are members of that center, and they're very deeply rooted in the person-centered approach. And most of them said to me that they were attracted to the person-centered approach because they experienced to themselves how people related to them in this person-centered way. So their intention to become person-centered came from their interaction from other people who were rooted in the person-centered approach. Well, just a few remarks about how person-centered approach is nowadays. Now it exists as a well-settled and developing system of knowledge, both scientific, theoretical, and ordinary everyday knowledge, and a system of practice in various areas of human life, such as education, business, everyday and personal relationships, psychotherapy, counseling, and so on. There is a lot of public organizations of people who are practicing person-centered approach and who are developing. Well, I am happy to say that in very many countries in the world, there are national organization-centered approach. And there are international person-centered organizations like the Center for the Studying of the Person in La Jolla, like the Association for Development of the Person-Centered Approach in North America, like the World Association for the Person-Centered and Experiential Psychotherapy and Counseling, and so on. It's very important to mention that. And there are magazines and books on the person-centered approach. There are conferences and forums which are held regularly. And even though the pandemic prevents coming together, we are capable to gather like on this event, gathering together from different parts of the world. And communication happens because it's a very important point for me. People who are joining for one or another reason those spheres of life which are filled with the person-centered values, regulations, practices, communication, and knowledge have an opportunity to experience and to join and accept person-centered approach. This is the way we meet the person-centered approach. Like children who experience person-centered relation to them from their parents. Like clients in the client-centered therapy. Like students studying person-centered approach. Like people who come to the encounter groups and experience its inspiring character, and so on. And there are possibilities in the whole world, and I mentioned some of them on this slide, which make it possible for people to experience, to meet, and to join person-centered approach. And people join person-centered approach not because person-centered approach is forced to them, imposed to them, but because it attracts them. So, person-centered approach nowadays exists as a subculture in the total culture of humankind. It exists as a system of knowledge, system of practice, as a very big group of people all over the world who are practicing person-centered approach in their everyday life, not just like their profession, but as their way of being, as their way of relating to people around them. It's a subculture. It's a way of being in the world, which is a very constructive and enable people to be themselves, to grow up, to actualize their potentials. Very constructive way of being in the world. And the person-centered subculture has a potential for changing to better the total culture of humankind. Yes, I understand. I'm not naive that prevalent culture all over the world is competitive, sometimes forcing, sometimes very rude, and so on. So people used to compete to become better, to win individually or like a group, in economics, in everyday life. But person-centered subculture is growing up in this global culture of the world. And I believe it really has the potential to change the whole total culture of the humankind. Because more and more people are attracted to this way of being in the world. On this slide, I quote Carl Rogers from his last book, A Way of Being, and chapter 15. It is about, well, from my point of view, about new world, about new culture, which is person-centered culture. And I will read it. This new world will be more human and humane. It will explore and develop the richness and capacities of the human mind and spirit. It will produce individuals who are more integrated and whole. It will be a world that prizes the individual person, the greatest of our resources. It will be a more natural world with a renewed love and respect for nature. It will develop a more humane science based on new and less rigid concepts. Its technology will be aimed at the enhancing rather than exploitation of persons and nature. It will release creativity as individuals sense their power, their capacities, their freedom. Well, Carl Rogers, being the founder of the person-centered approach and very respectful scientist and practitioner in the world, he put his emphasis on the individual experience all during his whole professional life. But at the end of his life, he more and more paid attention to this new way of being, which used to be not just individual phenomena, but mutual, collective, I would say, cultural phenomena. And I see this like a proof of the idea that the person's approach is a cultural phenomenon. I really believe that the person-centered approach is a cultural movement. So it's not just a professional practice. It's more than that. It's a cultural movement. And permission of PCA in various areas of human life, like interpersonal relationships, education, business relations, medicine, mediation of conflicts, and others, is the most convincing argument for seeing person-centered approach as a culturally based practice. And I believe that for us who are really attracted to the person-centered approach and who are interested in spreading it in our everyday life, it is very important to recognize that the person-centered approach is a cultural movement, and it's very important for us to put our conscious effort for its development. Our conscious effort for its development by means of our professional work, our person-centered communication, relating and being, and by means of establishing person-centered education, our group and societal efforts in spreading PCA in different areas of our life: business, conflict resolution, family life, politics, and others. It's very important, I really believe it's very important to be aware of that and make a conscious effort in spreading it. And I believe it's very important to do that if we really consider the person-centered approach as a valuable way of being. Not just thinking that it's well, individual phenomena and being very careful about each person, but making conscious effort on this, well, above individual level, making our conscious effort in spreading person-centered approach as a way of being and as a cultural way of being. And I finish with the slide with a word of cautious. It's very important not to make this effort in a bureaucratic way, because very often good initiatives become a bureaucratic formal way of putting it and imposing it to education, to everyday relationships. I would be very and bitterly disappointed if our effort to make this way of being more spread, if we put it in some bureaucratic and formal way. It's very important to stay person-centered in our own work, in our own relationships, and this is the guarantee or a way to make this approach spread, not just formal bureaucratic means to spread it. If we do that, it will be not person-centered, it will be, well, agenda-centered, it will be bureaucracy-centered approach to changing life. And I hope we will not do this mistake. Well, and my last slide is a little bit, well, it goes along with what I just said, but a little bit, well, specific, because I would like to say a few words about this COVID-19 pandemic and the growth of the person-centered culture. My own observation showed me that in these conditions of pandemic, people become more aware of the importance of connection, contact, relations and closeness with people. And during mutual support in these conditions happens actualization and co-actualization, is the word of Renata Moching, one of our Austrian colleagues. In these actual difficult conditions. Really, I myself, being isolated for a long time and being able to communicate to people only online, I realized how important for me is to be connected, to express my being with other people, to support other people, and to get this support and connection from other people. And many people all over the world, well, realize how important connection and relation is. We undervalued it before, and now this value of connection is more evident for many people. And I believe it will not go away after COVID will go away. This understanding of the importance of connection. And in these COVID conditions, people are increasingly realizing that they are not separate, but we are a single whole. It's a word of also one of our colleagues, Patrick Howley. And this brings back to the Roger's thought about the formative tendency, which was described in the way of being, as a tendency to be actualized not only at the level of individual organisms, but at the level of supra-individual organisms, groups, communities, humanity as a whole, and even the universe as a whole. So again, the idea of being connected and not being separate now is more evident for many people. Of course, I'm not naive, and this pandemic also revealed rivalry and competition and envy and many other ways and feelings people express to each other. But anyway, I want to stress that people are more and more aware about their being connected and more aware about developing together, but not being separate and beating each other. I hope I'm not naive in viewing this. So perhaps these realizations and insights, as well as the practice of cooperation during the crisis, will lead to radical change of humanity towards unity, of course, without losing the individuality of everyone, and not opposition competition, which was very characteristic of the pre-crisis culture. That means I really believe that even though pandemic is so hard for most of us, it will lead us to the development of the person-centered culture and the person-centered way of being. Well, that's all what I want to share with you, dear friends. And here are my contacts. If you are interested, you may have it, and I will be happy about your feedback now or later by email or phone. And thank you very much for listening to me and to giving me this opportunity to share what is important for me. Thank you.
I was speaking, I was in mute. People are clapping their hands because they like it too. And there is a lot of says in the chat, but there are now only 2 questions. I will make it in English for the translator to translate into Portuguese and to Spanish. And I ask you to wait a little bit after my question in order the translator have time to translate the question.
Okay.
Because yesterday, the the conferences, the presenter answer immediately my asking, and people didn't hear my question, your question, the question for the presenter. Okay. So the first one is from Fernando Antonio from Brazil. I don't know from where, but from Brazil. Thank you very much for your rich reflections. The way of PCA being based on presuppositions could be considered as an ethic. Can we consider those fundamentals from PCA as moral values? Did you understand the question? Because I translate from Portuguese now. Okay.
Yes, I understand the question. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Just a little bit. Can we go, translator? Okay. So.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for the question. It's not easy, and yet I believe that these principles of relating to each other with empathy, unconditional positive regard, congruence, well, becoming a cultural framework, they become basis for the new ethics, yes, and new moral values. And of course, it's very important not to lose this being centered on person, and not just demand you have to be empathetic, you have to be congruent, you have to be unconditionally positive regarding other people. Because moral values may be imposed to people and may become some means for structuring people, and in this sense it will not become a way for facilitating personal growth but suppressing people. I see the danger, and I hope that becoming a cultural way of being, yet it will not become a way to diminish people and to suppress them by demanding you have to be such and such and such. And yet I agree, yes, relating to people with unconditional positive regard, congruence, and empathy will become a new ethics and new moral values. I hope I answered the question. At least I expressed my view on it.
Okay, thank you, Venia. I have another question, yes, which is already written in English. Very good. From Luis Bernie, he says, Dr. Veniamin, yesterday, Dr. Segreira demonstrated in his presentation that the person-centered approach is weakened in the world because vulnerable, not well structured. How do you see the role of ideology and conservative values in the present world?
Mm-hmm.
Do they enable the development of the values advocated by PCA for human development?
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Well, as I said, well, traditional culture which is dominant in nowadays all over the world is competitive, very often not person-centered at all, centered on wealth, on success, on dominance, and so on. Yet, more and more people are dissatisfied with this culture, with this way of being. And they are looking for a new way of being. And I believe the person-centered approach attracts those people as a new way of being. And it may become a new culture. And of course, traditional culture is not happy about person-centered approach. And we see that in education, when experiments with student-centered education usually come to very strong opposition with traditional education. In everyday relations, being congruent, empathetic, unconditioned positively regarding other people very often comes in contradiction with traditional norms of relating to each other. So the growing of the person-centered approach is not an easy way. It's not an easy story, and not a short story. I believe it will continue for a substantial amount of time to grow up. I don't think it is weak. It grows up. It grows up in Russia. It grows up in other countries all over the world. Yes, in opposition and sometimes this competition with traditional culture, traditional cultural movements. Is it low structurized? I believe it's not low structurized because the basic conditions are enough for building relationships and life in different areas. Education, work, everyday relationships, and so on. So I am optimistic. I am not naive, but I am optimistic about growing person-centered approach. And it will grow up if, as I said in my report, if we who are attracted to the person-centered approach be aware that we need to make this conscious effort to spread it, to make it known to people, to put it consciously and by effort into education, in everyday life, into business. This will be the way for it to grow up. Yes, I share the idea of Carl Rogers of being a quiet revolutionary. And the idea, if you remember it, is, well, if I relate to people around me in the person-centered way, they are attracted to it because they experience understanding, they experience being regarded with positive regard, they experience sincerity and congruence, and they're attracted to it, and they may change to become also congruent, empathetic, unconditionally positive regarding. This is very important, but I believe it's very important also to make more than that, to make a conscious effort to put person-centered approach in different areas of human life. Not making this effort formally and in a bureaucratic way, because, as I said, it will be the main danger for the person-centered approach if we make it a bureaucratic way for imposing person-centered approach. But yet I believe it's very important to make this conscious effort to make this approach known and working in different areas of human life. I myself, in my life, experience richness and beauty of person-centered approach. And I make the effort to make it known to people around me. And we organized in Russia, in my university, this master's program on the person-centered approach. And many students come to us, study it, and become person-centered practitioners and live in the person-centered way. I work in education in Russia, and I'm connected to many school teachers, and I make person-centered approach known to them. And they are attracted, and they start to do what is possible, even in this traditional framework of education. They relate to people, and the students, people, in a human and person-centered way. And the situation in their classes changes. I believe it's very important to make this conscious effort to spread person-centered approach. And I know that it's possible to do a lot. And I hope you also make this effort yourself, and we together, and it will make this perspective optimistic.
Thank you, Venia. I have another question now from Virginia Teles from the Northeast.
Mm-hmm.
Do you believe that in countries with great social inequality, such as Brazil, it is possible that PCA culture of believing in the power of the individual and interpersonal relationship is enough to promote concrete changes in a broader culture? Or it will be necessary to reflect on another way of thinking about PCA culture? Do you want me to repeat?
Yes, please.
Okay. Do you believe that in countries with great social inequality, such as Brazil, it is possible that PCA culture of believing in the power of the individual and interpersonal relationships would be enough to promote concrete changes in a broader culture? Or it would be necessary to reflect on another way of thinking about PCA culture?
Thank you. Very important and not easy question. And my short answer, yes, I believe. But I will make some remarks and some to speak in detail about that. I don't think, and I am convinced that being person-centered is not weak. For example, I may say, but after being acquainted with the person-centered approach and practicing it in my profession, I started to relate to myself in a more person-centered way. I started to regard myself with self-regard. I understand myself better. I am more and more who I am in my everyday life. And I feel the strength of my being in those conditions where I live. And I live in Russia. I used to live in the Soviet Union. And I feel strength and capacity to grow up in these conditions personally, and being connected to other people whom I understand, being empathetic and listen empathetically people, regarding them unconditionally, and together we we are capable to understand problems we face and to change them to better. Modern Russia grows to better, it's my conviction. Yes, we have difficulties. And our society is also divided in the sense of people who are very rich and people who are quite poor. And yet I believe that it's possible to people to be person-centered, to be self-regarding themselves personally, and to grow up in this condition, and to change the whole culture, the whole society to better. In your question, I also feel that maybe it's important to think about person-centered culture using using other ideas like revolution or fighting for power and so on. I don't believe it's a constructive way to change the society to better. Russia had a lot of revolutions with a lot of blood, with a lot of people fighting each other, killing each other, and so on. It's not a way to change the society to better. It's my deep conviction. To become yourself, to relate to other people as they are, to come together with understanding. It's not easy very often. If one person is rich and I'm poor, and it's not easy to come to understand it, to regarding each other, but it's possible. And if we are capable to do that, there is the potential for coming together to solving problems we have. I hope I'm not naive in this view. And yet I say, yes, it's enough, as I view it. Not easy, but enough.
Márcia, você está mutado.
Márcia, você está mutada.
Ok. Obrigada. Veni, I was in mute and I was talking to you. I was saying that I feel you're very confident on PCA. I'm just, that's my comment. It's not a question, it's just a comment. Well, I'm going to turn for the fourth question. It's from Mark Harrison. Hi, Venia. Have you considered at all what is to be person-centered organization? Would a group or community that is self-actualizing be different? You want me to repeat? Okay, the translators want me to repeat. I will repeat. Have you considered at all what is to be a person-centered organization? Would a group or community that is self-actualizing be different?
Yes. Very good question. Very good question. And yes, I myself and my colleagues are thinking about that, and not just thinking, but working in that direction. Actually, one of my friends, colleagues, and teachers, Honest Meadows, and he used to be a member of the Person Center for the Studies of the Person. And he worked with organizations. he was a professional consultant during his life. He developed the idea of a new community where each person is competent in the person-centered approach. Community is, I repeat, where each member is competent in the person-centered approach. And in that community, people may be themselves in the fullest sense, and at the same time not suppressing another member of the group being as that person is. And it creates a new effect of synergy, great energy to solve different problems and to be connected to each other with great satisfaction, and to produce much more than fighting to each other and not understanding each other, not listening to each other, and so on. This is not just a theoretical model. And Honest Meadows himself worked with different business organizations. I work with some business organizations in Moscow and work on developing this new community where people are themselves, live in a congruent and way and empathetic way in relations with others, being capable to unconditionally positively regard each other. And these organizations become more productive than traditional, comparing to traditional organizations. It's hard to believe that, but in this competitive business world, this organization become more stable, more creative, more satisfactory in the sense of producing and in the sense of being satisfied with connection, with life, with creativity in this organization. So yes, thinking about person-centered organizations, communities, whole humanity is not just an utopia. It's a way to grow up. It's a way to develop such communities and such organizations. And I hope we go that way. This is my question, answer.
Okay, Venia, thank you. I have two questions here that are very similar, so I'll make it one. Okay, one of them is from Sinelli Vale from Brazil, and another is from Edson Bezerra, also from Brazil. Both of them are concerned with to think political and power relations within PCA as a culture movement, as a subculture. When we live in oppressive cultures, racism, social inequalities, violence against women, and other social problems. Do you want me to repeat?
I will appreciate that. Yes, please repeat.
Okay. How to think of political and power relations within PCA as a culture movement, as a subculture.
Okay. Yes, our modern society, our modern culture is divided by being rich or being power, divided with very many stereotypes and inequalities and so on. And I also believe and know, because, well, there are attempts of such practices. It's very important to people who being devoted to the person-centered approach and to person-centered way, yet in wishes and the needs of people, being oneself and not refusing your conviction, attention, and so on, and finding a way of
Venia? Venia? Can you hear me? I think Venia fall down. Caiu. Voltou? Hã? Venia, are you here with us now? Ele está aqui, André?
Acho que ele caiu, Márcia.
André disse que ele voltou, mas ainda não entrou. Essa é aquela pitada de tolerância e paciência que precisamos ter no mundo virtual. Dependente da tecnologia, dos sinais externos e de outros sinais. Ele voltou, André? Vênia me escreveu hoje um e-mail de manhã dizendo que o sinal lá em Moscou estava muito ruim. E talvez ele não tenha conseguido voltar. Eu sugiro que a gente faça uma pausa de 5 minutos para ver se ele volta. Se ele não voltar, nós passaremos para a nossa próxima conferencista, que já está presente, a psicóloga Finhamba, a Guiné-Bissau. Mas vamos fazer um intervalo de 5 minutos, acompanhando a gestão do Cláudio, para a gente levantar um pouco, tirar o olho da tela e voltarmos com bastante energia, tá bom? Agora eu já botei. Venia, I suggested 5 minutes break because you were out, and then I suggested that, so you wait 5 minutes and we will come back. Did you hear me? Wherever you are.